A tense situation erupted in a cozy restaurant where the dishes were always served with a smile. A black woman was sitting at a corner table, deep in thought, when a waiter approached her with a disdainful smirk. Unaware of her true identity, he began to humiliate her, fueling the fear and tension in the air. With each word, his disdain grew, while those around him only glanced at each other, unsure of how to react. It wasn't just a slight, it was a moment that could change everything. When her gaze met the owner's, standing at the bar, the tension reached its breaking point. How do you think this will all end? Hello everyone, write in the comments where you are watching this video from and what your name is. Also share if you have ever encountered racism. Your stories are important to us. Let's discuss it together. Enjoy watching. The quiet restaurant, bathed in soft lamplight and the aroma of freshly prepared food, echoed with the laughter of guests, but the atmosphere was deceptive. At one of the tables sat a black woman named Monica, enjoying her dinner and inhaling the casualness of the evening. Her features, full of dignity and confidence, lit up as she looked at the menu. At that moment, a waiter, short and sullen, with a displeased expression on his face, approached her table. "What? Are you alone?" he asked mockingly, casting a disdainful glance at her. "Don't you have any friends to keep you company?" Monica, not expecting such a reception, tried to ignore his comment, but her heart began to beat faster. She knew that there was something dark behind that smile. "Sorry, I'm just waiting for my husband," she replied, trying to remain calm. "Are you waiting for your husband? Or maybe he's too busy to come to you?" He continued with obvious glee. "It's funny that you even came here. This restaurant is for normal people." His words cut through the air like knives. Monica felt the tension building. She knew she should remain calm, but she couldn't hold back her emotions. "I won't let you talk to me like that," she said with a firm voice, but inside her heart was pounding with fear and anger. "Oh, are you going to threaten me?" He chuckled. "You probably think you can just come here and sit down like you're an equal with everyone else." Another guest, a white woman in a business suit, approached them and, noticing the tension, intervened. "I'm sorry, but this is inappropriate. Please stop. Go away. It's none of your business," the waiter shouted, ignoring her interruption. "I'm just doing my job. She should know her place." Monica jumped up from her seat, her voice growing louder. "I will not tolerate this humiliation. You have no right to speak to me like this." The waiter looked at her with disdain, his eyes blazing with hatred. "The problem is, you're nobody here, just another black woman trying to fit in where she doesn't belong." At that moment, the owner of the restaurant, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, walked through the door. Seeing what was happening, he approached the table and looked at the waiter with bewilderment. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "Nothing special," the waiter replied, but there was a note of panic in his tone. "Just teaching this lady how to behave." "Don't you dare talk to her like that," his owner interrupted sharply as his gaze fell on Monica. "I apologize for his behavior. It's unacceptable." But the waiter already felt the ground slipping from under his feet. The situation was getting out of control, and he didn't know what to do next. Owner's worried look only fueled the waiter's anger. He wasn't going to give in that easily. "You always hide behind your acquaintances," he said to the owner. "Nobody appreciates you the way I do anyway." Monica felt her heart skip a beat as she watched the waiter gather his strength and continue his humiliation. "Look at you, like you're a star, but to us, you're just another black nobody," he said with obvious disdain. "How many times have you been here? Do you think you can walk around like you're worth something?" At this point, silence fell over the restaurant. The guests, who had been watching the conflict with interest, froze, unsure of how to react. Some widened their eyes, others tried to distract themselves with food, but everyone understood that this was more than just an incident. This was the face of racism, naked before everyone. Monica, despite her growing sense of dread, was not about to give in. "I deserve as much respect as any other guest in this restaurant," she said with a fury that gave her confidence. "Your words are simply a reflection of your own ignorance." The waiter just chuckled. "Oh, look at her. She doesn't even know what she's saying. You're not in the right company to teach me respect," he said proudly, emphasizing his superiority. "Your husband will come and do you a favor soon, but you know it's only temporary." The audience became increasingly tense. One of the guests, an elderly man, could not stand it any longer and said, "This is not normal. You can't talk to a woman like that." The waiter looked at him with disdain. "Get out of here, "Old man, you don't need this drama," he snapped, his words cutting through the atmosphere like a cold wind. He turned to Monica and continued, "Do you think that because you're here you're allowed to do whatever you want? You're just disturbing normal people's evening meal." "Normal people?" Monica replied with an offended tone. "Do you really believe that your disdain for people determines who is normal and who is not? Your hatred and ignorance are what make you abnormal." The owner, trying to get the situation back under control, turned to the waiter again. "Enough. If you don't stop, I'll fire you right now." But the waiter only scoffed at the threat. "Fire you? You can't. I'm the best waiter in this place. You're just afraid of me." Monica felt anger boiling inside her. She turned to the owner. "Don't let him get away with this. These aren't just words. This is the reality I face every day." The waiter chuckled and said defiantly, "Yes, it is reality. Every day you like her come here as if you are allowed to do anything, but I will not allow this to continue." At this point, the excitement among the guests turned into an active discussion. People began to whisper quietly among themselves, exchange glances. Some took out their phones to record this humiliation. Monica's eyes reflected a determined intent, and she knew that she was not going to leave until she got justice. "I came here to enjoy the evening," she said, looking at the people around her, "and I will not let this man ruin it. I demand respect not only for myself, but for everyone who faces such situations." Her voice sounded confident, but inside she felt fear starting to creep up again. The waiter, realizing his position was weakening, came closer, looking at her with fury. "You think you can talk to me like that? You can't even defend yourself." With each word he spoke, the fear grew and the tension reached its limit. Monica, surrounded by the guards of racism, realized that this moment could be decisive. The waiter, sensing the tension in the room, became even more aggressive. He leaned closer to Monica, his voice a whisper filled with hatred. "Do you know that you don't belong in this restaurant? Everyone here knows that you don't belong. You're just another black woman who's come to a place where you're not wanted." His words were like an electric current running through her. Monica clenched her fists tightly under the table, trying to hold back tears of anger and humiliation. "Do you really think you can just talk to me like that? You have no right to judge me by the color of my skin," she said, trying not to show her emotions. The waiter just smirked in response. "The right to judge? I'm the judge here, and you're probably the only one who doesn't understand what's going on. Look around," he continued, looking around the room. "Everyone here knows that you don't belong here. You should stay on your side of town, where your kind are." This time the silence in the restaurant became oppressive. The guests did not know what to do. Some tried to look at the menu to distract themselves from the situation, but the fear of open hatred was felt by everyone. "You can't talk to me like that," Monica screamed, her voice like thunder in the silence. "I came here to relax, and I won't let you humiliate me." The waiter chuckled, as if that only fueled his hatred. "What are you going to do? Call your friends? They can't change anything. I know you're alone, and your mate is just a mask you wear. You're just a shadow, worthless." Monica felt her anger turn to rage. "What you don't understand is that I'm not alone. I stand on the shoulders of those who came before me. I'm not just a black woman. I'm a human being, and I will fight this hateful attitude." The waiter, feeling that he was losing control, began to get angry. "You? Fight? Ridiculous. You can never change the way people really treat you. They laugh behind your back, and you know it. Don't fool yourself." This time the owner intervened, but his voice was full of despair. "You can't talk to customers like that. I won't let you do it. Get out of here." The waiter just sneered. "How dare you tell me what to do? Do you know that I support your establishment? Without me, you wouldn't have regular customers." Monica, looking at the owner, realized that they were both trapped in his hatred. "This is wrong," she said, turning to the owner. "You have to protect your customers. Don't let this go unnoticed." Meanwhile, other guests began to talk among themselves, some expressing support, while others simply hesitated in fear. One of the visitors, deciding to intervene, said, "Hey, you have no right to humiliate her like that. We are all equal here." But the waiter just waved his words away, turning his gaze to Monica, his eyes blazing with hatred. "Look at them," he said mockingly. "They don't even understand that you can't fight the true reality. You will never be part of this society." Every word he said was like a heavy weight falling on the hearts of those around him. The tension had reached its limit, and Monica knew that this moment had to end. "You think that your hatred determines my worth? I know who I am, and I will not let you destroy my self-esteem with your vile words." The waiter leaned toward her again, his voice dangerously quiet. "You just signed your own death warrant. Do you think you can walk away from here as if nothing happened? I'll make sure you remember this evening." At that moment, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. The guests began to panic, and Monica felt fear creeping up again, taking over her mind. She knew she couldn't back down, but what could she do against a man who was full of hatred and contempt? The waiter, feeling like he had the situation under control, moved closer to Monica again. His eyes were blazing with anger and there was a malicious smile on his lips. "You think you can just stand here and defend yourself? You're not even worth paying attention to. I look at you and all I see is another black broad trying to fit into a world that doesn't belong to her." Like a bolt of lightning, his words pierced the atmosphere of the restaurant. The guests, who had been silent witnesses at first, began to look at each other, and confusion appeared in their eyes. Some of them, who had previously ignored what was happening, began to openly discuss the situation, condemning the waiter's behavior. "You can't talk to her like that," one of the men sitting at a table nearby shouted. His voice was confident, but the nervousness in his tone betrayed his fear. "This is simply unacceptable." The waiter, however, did not react to this interruption. He was focused on Monica. "What are you going to do? Cry? That's the funniest thing I've ever heard. You can't make me apologize, and neither can anyone." Monica, already beyond her patience, clenched her fists, but did not back down. "I'm not going to cry. I came here to enjoy dinner like everyone else, but you're humiliating me, and that's just not acceptable." "Unacceptable?" he chuckled, raising his eyebrows. "That word doesn't mean anything to you. You don't even understand that the real reality won't change, no matter how hard you try. I'm here, and I'm the one who decides who deserves what." As if sensing that a line had been crossed, Monica felt anger boiling up inside her. "You have no right to say that. I won't let you shut me up." At that moment, she saw the restaurant owner come closer, trying to intervene, his face distorted with worry. "Enough! I will not allow you to humiliate customers like this. If you do not stop, I will fire you right now." The waiter turned to the owner, his eyes full of mockery. "Fire? That's all you can say? Please, I don't believe you. You won't find a better waiter than me. This is your business, but you don't know how to run it." "Your business?" Monica said, unable to contain her emotions. "Do you really think your behavior is doing this place any good? You're a source of shame." The waiter just smirked in response. "What a disgrace. Look, I'm going to do what I want, and no one can stop me. I'm going to say what I think, and I don't care if anyone feels uncomfortable." At this point he raised his voice, addressing the other patrons. "Who among you would dare to support this black woman? No one, because you all know that she does not deserve your attention. All she does is laugh at herself." Monica felt the blood pounding in her temples. A battle was going on inside her, between fear and determination. "I will not sit here and listen to this," she screamed, her voice like thunder. "I will not tolerate your humiliation and racist remarks. I came here to gain respect." The waiter just chuckled. "Oh, yes, you came for respect, but from the looks of it, you won't get it. You can't even defend your honor. All you do is make a fool of yourself." The room froze again. Some guests began to whisper. Someone already reached for their phone to record this disgrace, but no one dared to stand up for Monica, and this only added to her fear. The owner, losing control, tried to intervene again. "Hey, I demand that you stop. This behavior is not acceptable in my restaurant." But the waiter, no longer listening, continued to humiliate Monica. "Don't listen to him. He just wants you to go back to your seat. You know that no one wants to see you here. They laugh at you, and you don't even understand that their sympathy is not respect." By this point, Monica's anger had reached its limit. She was not going to back down. "I'm not leaving here until you apologize. I will fight for my dignity, and you won't be able to humiliate me." But the waiter just chuckled, his voice becoming harsh. "Do you really think I'll apologize? You're not worth it. You're nothing." With every hateful word he spoke, Monica knew this battle wasn't just hers. It was a fight for everyone who had ever faced racism and prejudice, and she wasn't going to give up. The waiter, seeing that his words were beginning to have an effect on the audience, felt even more confident. "You obviously don't understand the world you live in, black woman," he said, raising his voice. "You're not in your neighborhood, and you're not in your community. You don't belong here, and you need to realize that." Monica clenched her fists, feeling her chest fill with not only anger but disappointment as well. "You have no right to judge me by the color of my skin. I'm a human being, just like you," she replied, trying to remain calm, but inside she was seething. "Human," he laughed, shaking his head. "Don't make me laugh. You're just a shadow in this world. You'll always be second class. How many more times are you going to come here before you realize your life doesn't matter?" Like a cold wind, his words made Monica feel even more vulnerable. She looked at the people around her for support, but all she saw in their eyes was confusion and fear. No one dared to stand up for her. At that moment, she realized that she had to be her own support. "I have a right to be here," she said louder, not wanting to give in. "I came to this restaurant, like everyone else, to enjoy the evening, and I will not let you humiliate me." The waiter, tired of her resistance, took a step forward, his voice low and menacing. "Do you know what happens when people like you start telling me what to do? I can make your evening a living nightmare. Do you think you're the only one who suffers? There are reasons why people like you shouldn't even dream of equality. You don't understand that strength and respect don't depend on the color of your skin," Monica exclaimed, already in despair. "I won't let you dictate how I live." His face twisted in rage. "Live? You don't live. You exist, and by existing, you just build up a rotten story about how you're being wronged. That's why you're always alone, because no one wants to deal with your problems." At this point, tension began to build around them. The guests began to whisper, but no one was going to intervene. Monica felt fear begin to wash over her like a wave, but she decided to fight again. "I will not leave this unanswered." The waiter took a step towards her, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You're just playing your game. I can make sure you're never allowed in here again. You can't eat here ever again, and I'll make sure no restaurant wants you." "You won't succeed," she said, her voice full of determination. "I will fight this. You won't be able to intimidate me." "You still don't understand that your struggle is just a joke." He frowned. "You're just a funny doll trying to show that you can be something more than you really are. But in reality, we all know that you are nothing, and all your attempts are just a pathetic attempt to hide who you are." Monica suddenly felt her soul filling with anger. "Get away from me with your threats and your insults. You can't break me. I know my worth, and you don't define who I am." Her words, filled with determination, struck those present, but the waiter only chuckled in response. "It's funny how you try to look strong when in reality you're just afraid. You think you can hold your head up high, but your whole life is a lie. You'll never be who you want to be, and I know it." At that moment, Monica felt her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she couldn't give him the chance to break her. "You have no power over me," she said, her voice hard and clear. "I'm not leaving here until you apologize. I'm going to fight for myself, for my honor." But the waiter just chuckled. "You think you can make me apologize? My hatred for you is more than just words. It's a part of me, and you can never change that." In that moment, when her words met his hatred, Monica knew that this would be a battle not only for her dignity, but for the dignity of everyone who had ever felt humiliated and devalued. She was ready to fight this hatred to the end. The waiter, seeing that Monica wasn't going to give in, decided to resort to more brutal methods. His face twisted in contempt and he leaned towards her, his voice becoming even more sullen. "Do you know what happens to people like you? Do you think that your meager attempts at resistance will change anything? You're just another black fool trying to get into a world where she's not welcome." His words cut into Monica like a knife. She felt her heart squeeze with pain. "You don't know what I've been through, and you have no right to judge me," she said, trying to hold back her tears, but her voice was treacherous. The waiter, seeing her weakness, smirked. "Weakness is exactly what I see. You're all in tears, and that makes you even more pathetic. Do you think anyone here is interested in your story? No one wants to hear about how hard you're going through. You should just leave." Monica felt the space around her shrinking. She turned around, looking for support among the patrons, but all she saw in their eyes was fear. Some looked away so as not to become witnesses, but her heart was breaking with humiliation. "You have no right to treat me like this," she screamed, her voice growing hoarse with emotion. "I didn't come here to listen to your insults." "Oh, that's what you came for, Blackie," he said mockingly, looking around the restaurant. "Look how everyone turns away from you. Not only are you alone here, but you're already dead to everyone. No hope. Everyone laughs when they think of you. You're a target for ridicule." Each word he said cut through Monica's soul. Images appeared in her mind, a childhood full of fear and misunderstanding, adolescence when she was humiliated for the color of her skin, and now this scene. Like déjà vu, she felt that she was returning to the moment when, as a little girl, she first realized that she could not be like everyone else. "Do you really think you can just destroy me?" she said, struggling to find the words. "I've learned to fight hatred, and you can't make me weak." "Weak? You'd better hurry up, because with every word you say, you're only proving that you don't belong here," the waiter said, his voice now threatening. "You'll always be just a stupid black woman who won't be interested in anyone." Monica felt tears welling up in her eyes. She wanted to scream, but she could only grit her teeth to keep him from getting his satisfaction. "I know who I am, and you don't define my worth," she said, though with difficulty. "You don't know anything," he said, raising an eyebrow. "You're just a little girl trying to act like an adult. In your world, you're fooling yourself. You can't leave this place until I tell you what to do." The waiter circled her table like a predator waiting to pounce. He leaned closer, and a wave of fear washed over her. "Please don't touch me," she said, but her voice shook just a little. "What? Are you afraid of me?" he sneered, leaning even closer. "That's all you are. You're just a victim, always suffering, always humiliated. You can't resist your fate." Monica felt anger and fear rack her. She knew she wasn't just a victim. She was a voice for everyone who had experienced racism. "I'm not a victim," she screamed, her eyes flashing with anger. "I'm a strong woman, and you can't break me with your contempt." But the waiter only laughed. "Strong? You are no stronger than the dirt I wipe off my shoes. You are just a toy in my hands, and I will do with you whatever I want." At that moment, a young guy sitting at the table decided to stand up and intervene. "You have no right to treat her like that," he shouted, his voice full of determination. "This is simply unacceptable." The waiter turned around, his face twisted in hatred. "Get your filthy hands off me. You're just another victim who wants to be listened to, and she never deserves respect." Monica felt his words making her feel unbearably heavy. Everyone around her seemed to be taking part in this spectacle of hatred. She felt like she was becoming the girl who had once been teased at school, and her soul was filled with fear again. "I will not remain silent," she said, but her voice no longer sounded so confident. "I will fight." "Fight? You don't even understand what you're dealing with," the waiter replied with a grin. "I'll destroy you in your dreams. You'll never be our equal." At this point, the tension around them was growing. Each guest could feel Monica's pain and suffering becoming more and more apparent. Her eyes were filling with tears, but she knew she couldn't let those tears turn into tears of defeat. "I won't give up," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I'll get through this and come out stronger." But while the battle raged in her heart, the waiter only laughed, his voice like a villain from a nightmare. "You're just weak, and I like it. I'm going to make your evening unforgettable, and you won't be able to leave until you feel the full pain of this humiliation." With every word, every taunt, the darkness closed in, and her battle with hatred became more tragic. Monica knew that her battle was not only for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt humiliated and oppressed, and that battle seemed to be just beginning. The waiter, offering a thin, ironic smile, stepped back as if observing his trapped victim. His confidence grew like the surf crashing on the shore. "You think you can scare me? I've seen your kind many times, always complaining, always suffering, but never acting. You just scream like the rest of them." Tears welled up in Monica's eyes, but she knew she couldn't give in. "I'm not just complaining, I'm fighting for my dignity, for my right to be here like everyone else," she cried, feeling her voice fill with rage. "Dignity? What is that to you? You're just a passing person in this restaurant," the waiter shouted, his eyes burning with evil fire. "Look around, everyone is laughing at you. No one wants to see you here." Monica turned around and was terrified to see the faces of the people who had just pretended nothing was happening open up. Some of them were whispering, others were looking at their phones to avoid meeting her gaze. Deep down, she knew it wasn't just fear, it was disgust. "You think you're special?" the waiter continued, looming over her. "I'm not going to apologize for your existence. You better accept that you're a nobody and your dreams are just dust." With his last words, tears came to Monica's eyes. She felt her inner world crumbling, but at the same time, the spark of determination flared even brighter. "You do not define my worth," she exclaimed, raising her head. "I will not let you break me." The waiter chuckled, but his eyes were filled with rage. Break? You're already broken. Every time you look in the mirror, you see it, you see your reflection, and you realize that you're nothing. Your life is one big humiliation. At that moment, she felt anger boiling up inside her. I'm not going to sit here and let you talk like that, she shouted, her voice like thunder. I'm not alone. I'm not here alone. There are a lot of people out there struggling with prejudice and hatred. I'm part of it. A part? Don't make me laugh, the waiter replied, his voice hoarse with anger. You're just a pathetic scream, not a part of something big. You're not capable of anything. Her heart started beating faster. I'm capable of so much, and I'm not alone. I came here to support myself and others, and I'm not going to run away from this hatred. Monica felt the tension around her reach its breaking point. Some guests started talking, some took out their phones, but no one dared to intervene. And yet, someone let out a faint whisper as the waiter continued to humiliate her. You haven't heard, have you? Your fight is already lost. I will make you cry like no one else. You don't have a chance because you are not our equal, he said, leaning closer to her face. The situation was becoming more and more terrifying with each passing second. Monica felt fear overwhelm her, but her inner voice wouldn't let her give in. I won't let you hurt me, she screamed, and her words echoed throughout the room like a charge of electricity. Stupid girl, the waiter growled. You don't understand that in this world. People like you will always be in the background. You're just trash. Her eyes filled with tears, but in that moment she knew that not a single tear should fall. I am not trash, and I will not remain silent, she shouted with full determination. My life matters, and I am here to prove it. Gathering her strength, she stood up, ignoring the fear and humiliation she felt. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of racism. I'm here to fight and defend my dignity. At this point, several of the guests finally began to react. One of the men stood up, his voice full of determination. You can't treat her like this. It's unacceptable. The waiter turned around, his face contorted with anger. Don't interfere. You don't know what you're talking about. But Monica felt a surge of strength when she saw the support. Thank you, she cried. This is not just my fight. It is our fight against hatred and prejudice. The waiter began to get nervous, his confidence wavering. You think you can change the world by screaming? It's just a pathetic joke, he said, but with less confidence. Monica gathered her strength and said, I'm not just screaming, I'm demanding respect, and I won't give up until it happens. Little by little, people began to gather around them, talking to each other. They began to criticize the waiter's behavior. Finally, when he realized that he was losing control of the situation, he felt his power slipping away. You are all obsessed with this pathetic game, he shouted, his voice filling the entire hall. This is not your fight. Monica felt her heart fill with hope. This is our fight, she cried, and we will not allow anyone to humiliate us because of the color of our skin. This hatred has no right to exist. With that scream, a fire ignited in her soul. She knew that this moment could change everything, and that together they could win. Each of them was a part of the story they were creating, and this battle was just beginning. As the tension and emotions grew, Monica noticed some of the guests starting to whisper, which didn't make her happy. Suddenly, a woman dressed in an elegant evening gown walked into the restaurant. Her confident posture and bright gaze immediately attracted attention. It was the owner of the restaurant, Emma. She noticed a change in the atmosphere in the room, and her eyes instantly met Monica's. Monica felt hope rise in her. Emma, she could be her ally. Her gaze was wary, but she couldn't help but notice what was happening. The waiter, not noticing her approach, continued to mock Monica. What? You expect help from your girlfriend? He said, laughing. She can't save you. She has her own problems. But Emma, coming closer, stopped him with her gaze. What's going on here? She asked, her voice full of authority and determination. The guests froze in anticipation, listening to her every word. I'm simply explaining to this black woman that she has no right to be here, the waiter growled, his insolence now seeming less confident. That's enough, Emma snapped, her voice like thunder. You have no right to treat anyone in this restaurant like that. It's unacceptable. Monica felt a new flame ignite within her. Thank you for intervening, she said, not believing that this situation could change everything. He's humiliating me simply because of the color of my skin. Emma, without taking her eyes off the waiter, continued, You work in this restaurant, but that doesn't mean you can humiliate the guests. Everyone has the right to respect." The waiter, feeling his grip on the situation slipping, replied, "But she shouldn't be here. She's just no good." With that he turned his gaze to Emma, but she did not hesitate. "She is my wife, and you will answer for it," she said, her voice full of determination. "I will never allow you to treat her or anyone else like that." Everyone in the restaurant froze in shock. Monica felt her heart beat faster. "What? I'm your wife," she said, not believing her ears. Emma, seeing her confusion, smiled slightly. "Yes, you are my wife, and you deserve better. That man will no longer work here." It was as if the world had turned upside down. Monica, feeling as if she were in a cloud, looked at Emma, and her heart filled with pride. She understood that Emma was not just protecting her, she was doing it out of love. "You have no right to fire me," the waiter shouted, his face red with rage. "You're just protecting your toy. You're not a person, you're just the embodiment of hate." Emma screamed, her voice growing more angry. "I don't want to see you here another minute." Monica felt the weight of fear and humiliation begin to lift. Instead, she was filled with strength. Supported by Emma's love and determination, she stood by her side, ready to fight for her rights and for those who could not defend themselves. "All you did was try to destroy someone who has a right to be here," Emma continued, her voice now firm. "I will not tolerate this kind of behavior from anyone who works in my restaurant. Get out." The waiter, seeing that he was losing support, turned around and left the room in a rage. The guests began to applaud, and Monica felt a strength growing within her. She was not alone. People gathered around her who believed in her fight. "Thank you, Emma," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I never thought you'd be on my side. You are my wife, and I will always be with you," Emma replied, hugging Monica. "We are together, and together we can overcome any evil." Now that the fear and humiliation were beginning to fade, Monica felt a renewed determination. She knew that this was only the beginning of their fight against racism and hatred. With Emma by her side, she felt she could handle any challenge. "We have to tell everyone," she said, her voice filled with power. "We have to show people that hate has no power over us." Emma nodded. "Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with this restaurant. We'll change the world." Monica, full of hope and determination, realized that together they could do something more. They could be the voices of those who suffer and change the perception of society. Every word, every action could be part of their fight for a better future. "We will not be silent," she said, "and I know that together we will make a difference." Monica and Emma, now as one, looked at the world around them with determination. They knew that there was a long way to go, but they were ready for this fight. Hate would not win, because love and support were stronger. As Emma and Monica stood in the restaurant, determined to change the situation, a shadow of fear still hung in the air. Guests, watching the unfolding drama, began to whisper, and some seemed to leave the establishment, taking their preconceived notions with them. But this only fueled the hatred of the waiter, who, feeling vulnerable, was not going to give in so easily. A few minutes passed when the doors of the restaurant suddenly opened and the waiter returned. There was anger in his eyes. He was ready for revenge. Behind him stood several of his friends, who had obviously come to support him. Their faces were full of disdain, and a smirk played on their lips. They knew that what was happening in the restaurant was not just an accident. It was an opportunity for them to demonstrate their superiority. "What the hell is going on here?" the waiter shouted, breaking the silence. "Are you trying to get a crowd together for a show?" Emma, standing next to Monica, felt the tension in the air rise again. "This is not a show. This is our life, and we will not let you ruin it," she replied furiously. The waiter laughed. "Your life? You're both just jokes to me. If it weren't for your money, no one would want to see you here." Monica, remembering how she had been humiliated, felt the anger burn again. She looked at his confident face, at his contemptuous eyes, and knew that she could not give in. But at the same time, a feeling grew inside her that this situation was getting out of control. Her fears were confirmed when one of the waiter's friends, a large guy with tattoos on his arms, stepped forward. "Hey, babe, if you don't want to regret this, you better get out of here," he said menacingly, approaching her. Monica felt fear rising in her, but she forced herself not to back down. "We're not leaving until you apologize," she shouted, her voice loud and determined. Apologize? The waiter replied, his face twisted with anger. Don't make me laugh. You're a loser. I'll make you feel what real hatred is. Suddenly he turned to his friend, who pulled out his phone, filming the whole thing. Let's show these black people who's boss, he shouted, his voice a challenge. Monica felt fear creep into her heart. She never thought she would find herself in this situation. The waiter and his friends didn't just hate her, they wanted to humiliate and intimidate her. You can't scare me, she screamed, feeling her voice tremble with fear. I'm not alone, and I will fight. But at that moment the waiter leaned closer, his eyes blazing with anger. I don't think you understand who you're dealing with, he said quietly, but his words sounded like a threat. I'll make you regret every word you say. The guests began to whisper. Some were filming the scene on their phones, but most were just standing there in stupefaction. And at that moment, Monica realized she had to act. Emma, we have to go, she whispered, feeling the threat looming over them. But Emma only squeezed her hand. No, we can't run from them. We have to show them that we won't be afraid, she said, full of determination. Suddenly, one of the waiter's friends came closer, his face twisted into an evil grin. What? You think this is going to go away without consequences? You don't know who you're dealing with, he said, approaching Monica. Maybe you should think about that before you continue your rebellion. I'm not afraid of you, she screamed, but inside she felt fear rolling over her like a shadow threatening to swallow her. The situation escalated when the waiter, seeing her fear, became even more aggressive. I'll show you what real humiliation is. I'll make you regret that you came here, he said, his voice hoarse with rage. And then, in the middle of the conflict, Monica suddenly noticed his friends approaching her, and her heart began to pound. One of them grabbed her arm, and this caused her to panic. Let me go, she screamed, trying to break free. You didn't think we'd let you get away with it, did you? He whispered, his eyes sparkling with malice. We'll show you what disrespect means. Emma rushed towards Monica, but one of the waiter's friends pushed her aside, and she fell to the floor. Stay out of this, he shouted, leaving Emma at a loss. Tears streamed down Monica's face as she saw her beloved wife in such a situation. Emma, she screamed, trying to rush towards her, but the waiter grabbed her by the shoulder, making her freeze. You're not leaving here until you realize you're not wanted here, he said, his voice filled with contempt. And at that moment, Monica felt an oppressive silence gathering around her. All eyes were on them, but no one dared to intervene. She realized that she was on the edge, and that this could be the moment that would change her life forever. I won't keep quiet, she screamed, fighting her inner fear. I won't let you humiliate me or Emma. But when she said those words, the waiter just chuckled. Oh, you really think your screams are going to help you? We can make this a lot more interesting, he said with perverse pleasure. How about we show everyone what really happens to those who decide to resist? With every sentence he spoke, Monica knew they were playing with fire. This wasn't just humiliation. It was something deeper and darker. She could feel the hatred creeping into the air, and her soul beginning to wither under the pressure. We can make this a real show, the waiter continued, his voice filled with a fleeting, malicious joy. We can show everyone what will happen to those who dare to oppose us, and you'll be the first to see it. Monica, realizing the gravity of the situation, realized that this moment could be decisive. Her heart began to beat in unison with her fear, but a voice sounded in her head. Don't give up. You have to fight. I won't give in, she screamed, trying to find strength within herself, but the darkness seemed to have already begun to consume her. However, at that very moment, Emma rose from the floor and stood next to Monica. You are not alone, she said, and her voice became a barrier against the hatred. We are together, and we will not let this happen. But at that moment the waiter leaned closer again, his face filled with cruel amusement. Oh, look at them, how protective they are of each other. It's so sweet. But don't worry, I'll make sure you remember this evening forever, he said, and his eyes blazed with evil sparks. Monica knew this night could end in tragedy, and as hatred filled the air, she took a deep breath, preparing for the fight she could not avoid. At the moment when the threat and hatred reached their peak, the doors of the restaurant swung open again with a loud sound, and a tall man with a determined expression on his face appeared on the threshold. It was Monica's husband, Alex, the owner of the establishment. He had just finished an important business meeting and, sensing that something was wrong, was hurrying into the restaurant, despite his tired gait and crumpled shirt. As Alex walked in, his gaze immediately fell on Emma, who was standing next to Monica, and a group of people threateningly surrounding them. There was tension in the air, and he felt his heart beat faster. "What's going on?" he shouted, pushing his way through the crowd. All eyes turned to him. The waiter, seeing the man approaching, tensed and straightened up. "Your toys have decided to challenge my authority," he said with disdain, pointing at Monica and Emma. "I'm just showing them their place." Alex, now realizing that this was not just a conflict but a real threat to his wife and her dignity, became even more determined. "What are you doing with them?" he shouted, his voice sounding like a menacing clap of thunder. Monica felt a surge of hope when she spotted her husband. "Alex," she cried, relief filling her voice. "I'm okay, but they..." Alex, without waiting for her to finish, came closer to the waiter. "Let them go. You have no right to treat them like this," he said, his eyes burning with anger. The waiter, surprised that Alex didn't take his side, laughed. "You think you can protect them? It won't help. They're worthless anyway." But Alex, ignoring his words, looked at his wife. "Monica, are you okay?" he asked, trying to shield her from the hatred emanating from the waiter and his friends. "Yes, but..." Monica started to speak, but Alex interrupted her. "You shouldn't have to go through this," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I won't let them humiliate you. No one has the right to treat you like this, and I won't tolerate it." Alex turned to the group, his expression becoming more menacing. "You think you can behave like this in my restaurant? I am the owner of this establishment, and I will not allow you to break our rules." The waiter, feeling his confidence begin to waver, grabbed his phone and started filming the scene again. "I'm going to film this. You can't just fire me. I'm still going to tell everyone who's boss." But Alex came closer, his voice harder. "You don't seem to understand the risk you're taking. I'm going to make sure you never set foot in this restaurant again," he said, his eyes flashing with determination. The waiter, realizing that his support was waning, tried to hide his fear behind his insolence. "You're just protecting your wife. That's all you can do." "I'm protecting my family," Alex shouted, his voice full of rage. "I will never allow you to insult them. I will do everything in my power to get you kicked out of this establishment." The situation was heating up and the tension in the room was at its peak. The guests started looking at each other. Some were clearly shocked, but others seemed to support the waiter, watching his defiant behavior. Alex, oblivious, continued to look at Monica, her eyes filling with tears. "We'll get through this together," he said, and it wasn't just a promise, it was a vow that he would protect her at all costs. Meanwhile, the waiter, realizing that the situation was getting out of control, became more aggressive. "You think you can intimidate me so easily?" he said, looking at Alex with contempt. "I'm not afraid of you." "You may not be afraid, but I see your cowardice," Alex replied, his voice sharp. "You are a loser hiding behind your hatred, and I will make sure you understand the meaning of respect." The waiter seemed to have little time to decide how to react. He was torn between anger and fear, but the closer Alex got to him, the more his confidence faded. And at that moment, with all eyes on them, Alex turned to Monica and Emma. "Let's get out of here," he said. "I don't want you to be in danger." But Monica, feeling strong with her husband, shook her head. "No, we're not leaving until they understand that their actions have consequences," she said, her voice full of determination. Alex looked at her and his heart filled with pride. "You're right. We have to show them that hate can't defeat love." At that moment, the waiter came closer again, his face twisted into an evil grin. "You think you can stop me? This isn't over yet," he said, turning to Alex. But Alex, full of determination, looked at him with contempt. "This is only the beginning. You leave here, and I will make sure that you never return." The crowd in the restaurant began to gather around, and their eyes filled with support. The hatred and threat that had been in the air began to fade under the pressure of love and unity that emerged among them. Alex and Monica stood shoulder to shoulder, and in that moment they realized that together they could overcome any difficulties they faced. They were ready to fight not only for themselves, but for all those who were oppressed and humiliated. "We will fight for this restaurant to be a place of respect and love, and no one will be able to stop it," Alex said, his voice sounding like a confident challenge to hatred. And with those words, the atmosphere around them changed. People started supporting them, and the hatred they had faced began to recede. Still, the isolated waiter felt his fear turn to rage. "You're all going to pay for this," he shouted, his voice sounding like an enraged animal trying to protect its territory. But Alex ignored him and turned to Monica and Emma, determined. We'll do everything to make sure this doesn't happen again. And we'll start from now." The atmosphere in the restaurant was tense and all eyes were on Alex, who stood with his arm around Monica, ready to protect her from the hatred and contempt that was coming from the waiter and his friends. The tension in the air was almost palpable and everyone felt that these moments could change everything. Alex, realizing that his position as owner gave him power, looked at the waiter with complete disdain. "Do you think that your hatred and aggression can go unpunished?" he said, his voice loud and confident. "You work in my restaurant, and I make the rules here." The waiter, sensing that the situation was getting out of control, tried to maintain his dignity. "You can't fire me. I have friends, and they won't let you get rid of me like that," he shouted, his voice shaking with fear and rage. But Alex, not one to be provoked, stepped forward. "You think your friends are going to save you? I just saw you humiliate my wife. You didn't just lose your job, you crossed a line, and I will not allow you to treat any customer in this restaurant like that," he said, his voice sharp and commanding. The waiter turned pale when he heard these words. He began to realize that the consequences of his actions could be much more serious than he had assumed. "It was just a joke, I didn't mean to offend anyone," he muttered, trying to justify his actions. Alex, not believing his words, pointed to the security guards standing nearby. "Get him out of here," he ordered, and his voice left no doubt. "This man can no longer work in my restaurant. He must answer for his actions." As if confirming his order, the guards stepped toward the waiter. "Come on. It's time to go," he said, and, grabbing the waiter by the arm, began to pull him toward the exit. "No! You can't fire me," the waiter shouted, his voice piercing the silence, but no one showed sympathy. The guests began to whisper and encourage Alex, realizing that he was standing up for the truth. "You chose this path," Alex said, his voice full of determination. "You didn't just insult my wife, you degraded everything this restaurant represents. I can't allow people like that to work here." As the waiter was escorted out the door, he began to panic. "You will not get forgiveness from me. I will tell everyone what you did," he shouted, but the doors closed with a dull thud, cutting off his threats. Alex turned to Monica, his heart filling with pride for her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "Yes, I'm okay now," she replied, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for coming. I knew I wasn't alone. We are always together, and no one can separate us," he said, hugging her. "I will not allow anyone to humiliate you, and this restaurant will be a place of respect for everyone." Emma, standing nearby, felt a surge of emotion. "Thank you, Alex, for protecting us. It was incredible," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. As if in response to her words, the rest of the guests began to applaud, raising their hands in support. It was a moment of unity, when everyone in the room realized that hatred and aggression had no place in their lives. Alex, feeling the support growing, turned back to Monica. "I want you to know that this isn't just your victory. This is our shared victory over hatred," he said, his voice full of confidence. At that moment, security entered the restaurant again, their faces full of determination. "We will check the whole team to make sure that no one will allow such things to happen," one of the guards said. Alex, seeing his words resonate with others, felt his resolve only strengthen. "This isn't just a business. This is a community, and we're going to protect it," he said with confidence. The situation seemed to have calmed down, but the shadow of hatred that the waiter had left behind still hung in the air. Alex knew that this was only the first step towards change, and he had to continue to fight to ensure that their restaurant remained a place of respect and unity. "We will spend the evening celebrating our resilience," he said to everyone. "I invite you to stay and enjoy the food, because we will not let hate break our spirit." The guests began to return to their tables, and Monica, feeling a surge of strength, turned to her husband. "Thank you for your support, Alex. I know we can get through this together." Alex hugged her, and in that moment they both realized that their love and unity would be a powerful weapon against any hatred that might arise. In this restaurant, where they had built their lives, hatred had no chance against love. While Alex and Monica were inside the restaurant, the atmosphere around them filled with hope and unity. Something completely different was happening outside the doors. The waiter who had been kicked out of the establishment was outside, his heart pounding with rage and humiliation. He stood on the sidewalk, not believing that he had been fired. Thoughts of hatred and revenge were swirling in his head. "How dare they?" he muttered, clenching his fists. "These blacks. They don't know who they're dealing with." His rage was growing, and he decided, on reflection, that he would not leave it like this. He pulled out his phone and started dialing his friends, people who shared his views and hatred. "Hey, guys, you won't believe what just happened," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "I just got fired for telling the truth. These black people, they just don't know their place." His friends began to respond and he felt a surge of support. "We have to do something. This restaurant shouldn't be open." "I knew what was going on and they were just covering it up," he shouted, feeling his confidence return. The waiter, consumed with hatred, decided he couldn't just let this go. "I know where they keep all the food. And if we get our act together, we can do something really bad," he said, savoring every word. "We can show everyone who's really boss." Having gathered, his friends began to plan an act of revenge. They decided that they would return to the restaurant to raise a ruckus and intimidate the owner and his wife. The waiter proposed ideas full of hatred. "We can just storm in and show them who the real bosses are. They will get what they deserve." When he finally ended the conversation, his anger only grew. He felt almost alive from the hatred he harbored. He raised his head with clenched fists, preparing for revenge. Meanwhile, Alex and Monica were enjoying a moment of togetherness in the restaurant, unaware that a plan to humiliate them was being formed outside. They watched as the guests returned to their tables, but the excitement was still in the air. Monica, noticing the tension, glanced at Alex. "Are you sure we're safe?" she asked, her voice sounding concerned. "Yes, but we have to be on guard," Alex replied, his instincts telling him that the danger was not over yet. "We have to be prepared for anything." Meanwhile, a few blocks away, a group of the waiter's friends were already gathering. They were discussing the details of their plan and making aggressive jokes about how they would humiliate Monica and Alex when they returned to the restaurant. "Let's make this a night to remember," one of them said, grinning. "They can't just get rid of us." Furious and with their vengeful intentions, they headed toward the restaurant, ready for action. The waiter felt in control, his inner bitterness lifting his spirits as if he were riding the crest of a wave. "Today they will get what they deserve," he said, his voice full of contempt and confidence. As they approached the restaurant, the excitement was almost palpable. They paused at the entrance, ready to enter and disrupt the peace that Alex and Monica had so carefully created. The waiter, taking the lead, nodded to his friends. "On my signal," he said, preparing to step forward, full of rage and malice. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, Alex and Monica continued to chat with the guests when the door suddenly burst open and the crowd rushed in. Noise and aggression filled the space, and at that moment, Alex, sensing an impending threat, immediately reacted. "Hey, what are you doing? Get your hands off my customers," he yelled, ready to defend his guests and wife. The hatred and anger that filled the restaurant was in stark contrast to the atmosphere of unity they had worked so hard to create. The crowd that stormed into the restaurant was full of rage and aggression. The waiter, leading his friends, pushed the table, sending plates and glasses rolling across the floor. "We're here to show you who's boss," he shouted, his voice booming over the shock and bewilderment of the guests. Alex, instantly sensing the growing threat, stepped between Monica and the aggressive crowd. His heart was pounding, but his determination to protect his wife and his clients was stronger than his fear. "You have no right to be here," he shouted, his voice confident but with a note of alarm. The guests began to whisper and hide, and some of them began to rise from their seats, trying to leave the restaurant. "This is your last warning. Get out while you can," Alex shouted, raising his hand, as if to protect his family and business from what was happening. But the crowd wasn't going to go away. "You fucking owner, you think you can just fire us and get away with it?" one of the waiter's friends yelled, heading towards Alex. "We're here to show you that it's not that simple." The waiter, feeling that his authority had been undermined, pulled out his phone and began filming the scene. "Look everyone! This restaurant is a place where we are not appreciated. We will show them who really rules here." His voice sounded with growing anger, as if he was ready to declare war. Monica, feeling the tension rising, took Alex's hand. "We have to go, Alex. This is getting dangerous," she said, her eyes full of fear. But Alex wasn't going to back down. "I won't let them intimidate us," he declared, clenching his fists. At that moment, one of the aggressive men standing nearby jumped up to Alex and pushed him in the chest, forcing him to take a step back. "You think you can just stand between us and what's ours?" A moment of confusion and fear hung in the air, and Monica, realizing that the situation could get out of control, screamed, "Get your hands off him." Her voice sounded with such force that many turned to look at her. But this only fueled the crowd's anger. "What did you say, black whore?" One of the men insulted her, clenching his fists and stepping closer, evoking a sense of imminent violence. Alex, seeing the threat hanging over his wife, exhaled sharply. "Don't you dare touch her," he shouted, but the man, ignoring him, raised his hand, preparing to hit Monica. At that moment, everything seemed to freeze. The guests, frozen in fear, began to scream and bang on the tables, raising a panic as the crowd moved aggressively towards Alex and Monica. Suddenly, one of the security guards who remained in the restaurant stepped forward and tried to stop the men. "Get your hands off them," he shouted, but the crowd only laughed at him, feeling superior. The waiter, watching everything, held up his phone as if it were a show. "Watch us deal with these blacks and their protectors," he shouted, and the laughter of his friends echoed, underlining the tension. Alex, full of determination, stepped forward and roughly pushed one of the aggressive men who was trying to get closer to Monica. "I will not allow you to humiliate my wife or any of my clients," he shouted, his voice sounding like thunder in the silence. But the violence had already flared. The man who had been pushed responded with rage, and the air cracked as he struck back. Alex retreated, hurt but not giving in. Monica, terrified, screamed, "Alex, run," but it was too late. One of the women in the crowd threw a glass, which smashed against the wall, and this was the beginning of real chaos. Guests, scared and depressed, began to run for the exit, and waiters and security guards tried to stop the violence, but their efforts were in vain. Alex, feeling his anger rise, suddenly became part of the horror. He began to defend himself, throwing himself at the men, trying to block their blows, but the crowd only grew. Monica stood to the side, her heart pounding with fear, but she knew she couldn't just stand there and watch. At that moment she decided to act. "Please stop. We are all human, and we shouldn't do this," she screamed, but her words were drowned out with cries of hatred and laughter. The waiter, completely consumed by hatred, continued to film the event. "Here they are, these blacks. We must show everyone how they really behave." His voice was filled with malice. Inside the restaurant, a full-scale fight began. Tables were overturned, chairs were thrown, and no one could escape the violence. Alex, fighting off several men at once, felt his strength draining. He knew he couldn't let this nightmare continue. Alex looked around and saw Monica, her face full of fear, but her eyes full of determination. "We will not give up," he said, feeling that it was this confidence that would give them strength in this nightmare. As they both fought for their safety, the situation escalated, and no one knew how it would end. Each of them knew that this evening would forever remain in their memory as a clash of hate and love. The situation in the restaurant reached its violent peak. The screams and laughter of the aggressive crowd mixed with the noise of smashing dishes and falling tables, creating chaos. The guests who remained inside hid behind tables, waiting in fear to see what would happen next. Alex, feeling time was running out and his strength was fading, shouted, "We can't let them ruin our business." "Monica, stay close." He headed for the nearest table, grabbed a heavy chair and, using it as a shield, curled up into a defensive stance, preparing for another wave of attacks. The waiters, who had recently served customers with a smile, were now caught up in this terrible conflict. One of them, frightened, tried to stop the crowd, but his voice was lost in the hubbub. "Stop! You can't treat our customers like this," he shouted, but no one listened. Suddenly, one of the men in the crowd jumped up to Alex, his face twisted in hatred. "You think you can save your wife? We will break you." he shouted before pushing Alex in the chest, forcing him to retreat. From there, things got even more chaotic. Monica, determined not to be left out, grabbed the nearest object, a glass cup, and before she could think, threw it into the crowd. The glass shattered against the wall, attracting the attention of several aggressive men. "Look, the black liar. She's trying to play the victim again," one of them shouted. Rising towards Monica, he stepped towards her, preparing to strike, but she was ready to repel the attack. "Don't you dare come near me," she screamed, her voice full of rage and fear. She dodged and instead hit his arm, causing him to cry out in pain. At this point, Alex, sensing that the time had come to act, came to Monica's defense. He clenched his fists and rushed forward. "Get away from my wife, you piece of shit," he screamed, punching the man in the face. The blow was hard, and the man staggered to the floor, leaving his friend confused. But this only angered the others. "Hey, you're going to pay for this," shouted another man, rushing at Alex. He grabbed him by the shirt and began to pull him towards himself. But Alex, not wanting to give in, broke free and tried to strike back, but he dodged and the blow missed. The scene around them became increasingly chaotic. The waiters tried to stop the violence, but their efforts were in vain. One of them, seeing what was happening, took out his phone to call the police, but was immediately surrounded. "You dare not call the police," shouted the waiter, who was beginning to lose control of the situation. "We will show you who is boss." Meanwhile, Alex and Monica continued to resist, but the crowd was getting stronger. Alex was finding it increasingly difficult to protect his wife, and he felt his strength leaving him. He looked around, trying to find a way out, and his gaze stopped at the door. "Monica, we have to get out of here," he shouted, his voice rising above the din again. "On the count of 3, we're running for the exit. Are you ready?" "Yes, I'm with you," she replied, her voice full of determination despite her fear. 1, 2, 3, he shouted, and together they rushed towards the exit, but the crowd was not going to let them go so easily. One of the men, seeing their intentions, jumped forward, blocking their path. "Where are you going? You won't get away from us so easily," he shouted, and his hand shot out toward Alex. Alex, having noticed this movement, grabbed the nearest chair and used it as a shield. The blow was strong, but Alex was able to deflect it. "Don't touch us," he screamed, his voice full of rage and despair. The crowd, seeing that their victims were starting to resist, only became more angry. "We will do to you what we want," one of them shouted, aiming his gun at Monica. But at that moment, when the impending threat seemed imminent, the sound of a siren suddenly came from behind the doors. The police had finally arrived on the scene. Shouts of get out, could be heard, and everyone in the restaurant who was still there began to panic, running in different directions, trying to find shelter. Alex, feeling hope returning, put his arm around Monica and pulled her towards the exit. "Hurry, we have to get out of here," he shouted, his voice full of determination. The waiter, who witnessed the panic, noticed the police approaching and his face twisted. "You won't leave, I won't let you," he shouted, but there was already doubt in his voice. Monica, realizing that this was their chance, ran with Alex to the exit, but the crowd, realizing the police were approaching, began to panic even more, and in this chaos, Alex and Monica managed to get through to the door. Suddenly, as they were about to run out, someone grabbed Monica's arm. She turned around and saw that it was one of the men, his face distorted with hatred. "You're not leaving that easily," he screamed, trying to hold her back. But Alex, not wanting to lose his wife, pushed the man and pulled her towards him with force. Run to the car," he shouted, seeing how the police had already arrived and were guarding the exit. As they broke out into the street, the chaos inside the restaurant continued. The police began to enter, dispersing the crowd and catching the offenders. Alex and Monica, having made it out into the fresh air, immediately headed to their car, their hearts pounding with adrenaline and fear. "We did it, we got out," Monica said, her voice full of relief, but at the same time they both knew that the consequences of this incident would be long and painful. Alex got behind the wheel, looking in the rearview mirror as he saw police fighting the crowd inside the restaurant. "We have to report what happened," he said, his voice filled with determination. "This can't go unpunished." Their hearts were filled with fear, but also with hope for change. They knew that this evening was not just a fight for their own safety, but also a fight against the hatred that still existed in their society. The situation around the restaurant gradually calmed down. The police, calmly stopping the rioters, began to break the crowd into groups, checking identities and recording incidents. The aroma of freshly cooked food that had previously filled the air was now mixed with the smell of fear and hatred. Alex and Monica watched the police action with relief in the car. "I think this is finally ending," Monica said, her voice still shaking from the stress of the experience. "Yes, but we can't forget what happened," Alex replied, looking at the scene of chaos. "We can't let it go without consequences." Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, owner Alex was determined to put an end to this horror. He approached the racist waiter, who had distanced himself from the scene and was sitting on the floor, shaking with fear and anger. "You don't work here anymore," he said coldly, looking at him with disapproval. "What? That's not fair," the waiter cried, raising his head. "I just said what I thought. It was just a joke." "A joke? You humiliated people just because of their skin color. This is not a joke. This is a terrible crime," the owner shouted, his voice full of anger. "You cannot work in this restaurant, which strives to be a place where everyone feels safe." The waiter tried to justify himself, but the owner wasn't listening. He pulled out his phone and added the waiter's name to the restaurant's blacklist, making sure he couldn't get a job at any of his establishments. "You will never work in the hospitality industry again," he said, clutching the phone in his hand. "Your actions today were disgraceful, and they will not go unpunished." Outside the restaurant, a sense of uncertainty grew as the police continued to sort out the aftermath of the incident. Monica, feeling the need to do more than just watch, pulled Alex along with her. "Let's get this on the news. We need to let others know what happened to us." "You're right," he agreed, his heart filling with determination. "We can't let this horror go unnoticed." They quickly filed a statement with local news outlets describing the incident that had taken place at the restaurant, including their names and contact information. Soon, reporters approached them, listening with interest to their story and taking down details. "It's terrible that something like this can happen in our society," one reporter said during an interview. "How do you feel about what happened?" "We're in shock," Monica said, her voice still shaking from the memory of defending herself and her husband. "But we hope that our case will help others understand that racism is not a joke and we must fight it." After they finished the interview, Alex and Monica returned to their car, but with less tension. "I feel like we made the right move," Alex said, his voice filled with newfound hope. "Yes, now we can help others who are facing similar situations," she replied, smiling. "We can change the world for the better." And while both were scarred by the horrors of their past, they knew their story would now be an important part of the conversation about racism and hate. Together, they decided to use their voices to inspire others and continue the fight for justice. Several weeks have passed since the incident at the restaurant, and even as the world around them has gradually returned to normal, the scars remain. Alex and Monica have continued their work to educate the public about racism, and their story has attracted considerable attention. With each passing week, their social media feeds began to fill with more and more people sharing their stories of how they had experienced racism. Their story became not just a personal tragedy, but also a symbol of the fight against bias, inspiring people to come together. Meanwhile, the restaurant owner decided to conduct an internal investigation. He realized that the incident with the waiter was not an isolated incident. During interviews with other employees, it turned out that some of them had also witnessed racist comments and actions that took place in the restaurant, but were afraid to speak out for fear of repercussions. The owner decided it was time for a change. He organized diversity and inclusion training for the entire staff, teaching them to respect every customer, regardless of color, race, or background. "We must create an environment of safety for everyone," he said at the first meeting. "Racism and hate have no place here." Over time, these efforts began to bear fruit. Gradually, more black customers began to come to the restaurant, and their presence became noticeable. Monica and Alex, observing this process, felt that their work was paying off. "Look at how many people are coming," Monica said, pointing to a group of friends laughing happily at one of the tables. "Yes, it's amazing," Alex replied, his heart filling with pride. "It means we're not alone, that we can change public opinion." But even as the restaurant gradually transformed into a more inclusive place, some people struggled to maintain old habits. Despite their best efforts, they knew that completely eradicating racism from society would not happen overnight. One of the new servers, despite having undergone training, sometimes unwittingly whispered comments that upset customers. One day, When a group of black customers came into the restaurant, one of the waiters said carelessly, "Well, what would you like to order if you had money?" This caused immediate confusion at the table. The customers exchanged glances, and then one of them, confident in himself, looked at the waiter and said, "Listen, we're here to enjoy the food, not listen to racist comments." Luckily, the restaurant owner, passing by, heard this remark and immediately intervened. "Sorry, I will not allow this to happen in my restaurant," he said bitterly. "If you can't respect our customers, you can't work here." After this incident, the owner decided that another general meeting should be organized. "We must remember that every person is valuable and we must protect our customers from any bias," he stated with determination. "If someone violates this rule, they must know that we will not tolerate such behavior." With each passing day, the atmosphere at the restaurant became more respectful and understanding. More black customers started coming in, and their positive reviews of the place filled social media. Alex and Monica were happy to see their struggle begin to bear fruit. They knew there was still a lot of work ahead, but now they felt like they were part of something bigger. "We did it," Monica said one day, looking out at the people enjoying their dinner. "We made a difference. Now we can help others." "Yes, and this is just the beginning," Alex replied, squeezing her hand. "We will continue our work. It is important." And they continued their mission, bringing attention to issues of racism and creating safer, more respectful spaces for everyone. Every day, their efforts changed the community for the better, and they knew this was just the beginning of the journey to a brighter future. After the incident at the restaurant and all the struggles with racism, Monica felt that her moral life began to change for the better. Although the experience left scars, she became more confident in herself and her place in society. Her voice, previously suppressed by fear, now began to sound louder and clearer. Every time she went out, she felt warmth and support from people who shared her opinion. The positive reviews about the restaurant, where more black customers were coming, confirmed that their efforts were not in vain. "We can change society," she thought, looking at the smiling faces enjoying the atmosphere in the restaurant. Working with Alex on their social activism strengthened their bond as a couple. They began hosting events together to raise awareness about racism and equality. Monica often shared her thoughts and stories on social media, bringing attention to the issues that black people faced. Her words resonated with many, and she felt like her mission inspired others. There were many new faces among the customers coming to the restaurant, and they shared their experiences. Monica became not only a witness to the changes, but also an active participant. She began to communicate with new friends who supported her ideals. Their discussions were filled with hope and aspiration for a better future. Every day, her morale improved. She felt that her personal experiences were part of something bigger. This realization brought her satisfaction. Participating in events to raise awareness about racism and interacting with other activists gave her strength and confidence. But that wasn't the only thing that changed her life. Monica began doing sports and self-development. She signed up for yoga classes, where she learned to find inner peace and balance. At each workout, she freed herself from stress and left all the negative thoughts that once tormented her outside the gym. "I'm getting stronger," she thought, performing each asana. Her inner world was filled with joy, and she realized that she could now allow herself to enjoy the little things. Walks in the park, meetings with friends, and new hobbies became an important part of her life. Every day she got up with the thought that she could make the world a better place, starting with herself. Over time, Monica and Alex began organizing meetups at the restaurant where they discussed important topics about racism and equality. These events attracted many people who wanted to hear their story and ask questions. Monica was happy to share her experiences, and this inspired many. "We all need to know that we are worthy of respect," she said, looking at the faces of the participants. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. We have a right to happiness and equality." Not only did Monica's moral life improve, but she also became an example to others. She realized that her voice was important, and every time she spoke, her confidence grew. She learned to accept support and love herself, which was an important step in her recovery. With each passing day, Monica grew stronger, her inner light brighter, and she knew that despite all the difficulties, she could influence the lives of others and build a society based on respect and love. After being fired in disgrace, the white racist waiter, Mark, was left alone on the street, feeling humiliated and abandoned. His life had changed dramatically. When he left the restaurant, His initial confidence and arrogance that had driven him to such terrible actions were erased. He knew that his actions had not only cost him his job, but also put his reputation at risk. He struggled to find new jobs at other restaurants. He still heard about his embarrassing incident from time to time, with people discussing his actions on social media. His name became synonymous with hate, and employers looking for employees began to be wary of him. "No, we can't take him," they would whisper to each other when his name came up. Despite his efforts, Mark found that his old friends were beginning to distance themselves from him. They did not want to be associated with a man whose actions had become a symbol of racism. One by one, those who had previously supported him began to ignore his calls and messages. This left him feeling alone, and his mental state was deteriorating. He was sinking into depression, realizing that his actions had far-reaching consequences. He hit a dark patch in his life. He spent his days stuck in his apartment, surrounded by empty bottles and leftover fast food. He didn't go outside and isolated himself from the world. Deep down, he knew he had done wrong, but his pride and shame prevented him from seeking help or trying to atone for his guilt. Meanwhile, life moved on at the restaurant he once staffed. The owner, Alex, became more proactive in creating an inclusive and safe environment for all customers. Monica and other activists became the norm, and each night the restaurant was filled with people of all races and nationalities. One day, as part of an anti-racism event, the restaurant hosted an evening where activists and representatives of different cultures were invited. Monica, as the host, shared her story, inspiring others to take action and uniting people. Returning to his life, Mark still felt isolated and depressed. He began to realize that his hatred had not only ruined the lives of others, but had ruined his own as well. At one point, he decided that he had to try to change his behavior. "I have to do something," he thought, looking in the mirror and seeing the reflection of a man he no longer recognized. One day, gathering all his resolve, he walked into a restaurant. His heart was pounding with fear and guilt. He knew what he had done was terrible, but he felt the need to say something. When he walked in, the atmosphere inside was festive, full of people smiling and chatting. "What are you doing here?" one of the waitresses asked, looking at him with disbelief. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice shaking. "I realized how wrong I was, and I'd like to try to make it right." The owner of the restaurant, hearing the noise, came out of the kitchen. His eyes met Mark's, and there was bewilderment in his gaze. "You?" he said, not believing his ears. "I understand what I did. I can't change the past, but I want to change the future," Mark said, his voice full of remorse. "I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to accept criticism and work on myself. Please give me a chance." Alex thought about it. Conflicting feelings arose in his heart. He remembered what had happened, but he also understood that all people were capable of change. "Do you realize that your actions have caused great harm?" he asked. "Yeah, and I'm not making excuses. I just want to do something good," Mark replied, his eyes filling with tears. "Please." After much thought, Alex made a decision. He couldn't just forget about what happened, but he also understood that forgiveness and the opportunity to change his life could lead to positive results. "Okay, you can take the training, if you're really serious. I'll give you a chance," he said. Mark, though overcome with emotion, felt relief. He knew this was just the beginning of his journey to redemption. He began attending inclusivity classes, talking to activists, and learning how to overcome bias. It was a difficult path, full of self-criticism and self-awareness, but gradually he began to understand the importance of respecting and supporting others. Each interaction with new colleagues and clients changed him, and he hoped that one day he could earn forgiveness. As life at the restaurant continued to improve, Mark became part of this new world. While he knew his past would always be with him, he also knew he had the opportunity to create a better future for himself and those around him. A few months passed, and life at the restaurant continued to change for the better. Monica and Alex worked to create an environment where everyone felt valued and respected. Their efforts resulted in more regular customers, as well as new ones who wanted to support the ideas of inclusion and diversity. Mark, through training and self-improvement, gradually became part of this community. He knew his path to redemption would be long, but each day brought new lessons and realizations. He began to interact with customers, learning to respect their stories and experiences. His interactions with the black customers who came to the restaurant became a real challenge and an opportunity. At first, they were wary of him, remembering his past actions, However, Mark was sincere in explaining how he had changed. He shared his experiences openly, showing that he had realized how dangerous prejudice and racism could be. His honesty and desire to atone for his guilt began to gradually break down the wall of mistrust. The atmosphere in the restaurant became more and more positive with each passing day. Monica and Alex organized events where they discussed important topics such as racism, equality, and love. These meetings brought together many people, creating a space for open dialogue. Mark sometimes participated in these discussions, and his story of transformation became an inspiration for others who were also looking for a path to change. One day, during one of these events, Monica addressed the audience. "I want you to know that change is possible," she said. "We are all capable of making mistakes, but it's important to learn from them and move forward." She pointed to Mark, who was standing next to her. "He has become part of our family, and his story shows that we can change our perceptions and build bridges, even when it seems impossible." The crowd began to applaud, and Mark, though overcome with emotion, felt his heart fill with hope. He realized that his journey to redemption really did matter. It was a moment when he realized that not only had he become part of a new community, but that he had the opportunity to help others. With each passing day, the restaurant continued to become a place where diversity and inclusion were valued. People of different races and cultures came, mingled, shared stories, and supported each other. Monica and Alex, watching this process, realized that their efforts, despite the difficulties, were beginning to bear fruit. Although Mark knew his journey would not end, he felt he now had a purpose. He became active in the equality movement, teaching others the importance of overcoming bias and hatred. He understood that every step toward understanding and respect matters. So what started out as a tragic story about racism and bias became a powerful story of hope, redemption, and unity. The restaurant became a symbol of change, a place where everyone could find support and understanding. And Monica, Alex, and even Mark became living examples of how change is possible if we are willing to work on ourselves and respect each other. And although there was still much work ahead, each of them knew that together they could change the world, starting small, with love and respect for every person. Mark, Monica, and Alex continued to work to create a space where the values of respect and inclusion were at the forefront. Each of them, in their own way, became an important part of the story of change. Mark, despite his difficult past, became a true ambassador for change. He taught classes and shared his lessons with others who were also looking for opportunities to grow and understand. His sincerity and willingness to change inspired people, and every time he looked into the eyes of his clients, he saw a reflection of his own mistakes and hopes for the future. Monica and Alex continued to run the restaurant, but it was now more than just a business. It had become a community where everyone felt heard and valued. Regular events focused on racism and equality drew more and more people, and each night the restaurant was filled with laughter, warmth, and heartfelt conversation. The moments when clients shared their stories were special. Every time someone stood up to share their experiences, there was a sense of unity in the room. Everyone understood that despite their differences, they were part of one big family. And then one evening, as Monica was sharing her thoughts about love and respect, she looked at the people gathered and felt as if all her fears and worries were in the past. She knew that with every step they were moving toward a better future. "We must remember," she said, smiling, "that each of us is capable of change, and even in the most difficult times, we can find hope in others and in ourselves." Alex nodded, looking at his partner with pride, "And together we can build a world where there is no place for hatred, but only love and understanding." So the story that began with humiliation and racism ended with a bright moment of hope and unity. Each of the heroes continued their journey, knowing that despite the difficulties, they are able to change the world for the better, step by step, with love and respect for everyone. And, dear viewers, we would love to hear your thoughts on this story. What do you think about the fight against racism and the importance of uniting for justice? Have you ever experienced bias or discrimination in your life? Every comment you make means a lot to us. We value each of you and your stories. You are an important part of our community, and your support helps us continue to talk about the topics that matter most. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to create even more interesting and meaningful stories. Have a nice day.